Hello there, welcome to the marketplace. Coming up, prices of some petroleum products expected to go down this weekend. We shall engage a petroleum expert on matters around compliance when it comes to the issues of deregulation. Also, the communications minister is calling for immediate media regulations to check fake news and harmful content.
If for nothing at all, the imperative of having a set of regulations to guide the content that we produce is now apparent to all of us.
Plus, government fully takes over Airtel Tigo after intense negotiations. We have the statement from the Ministry of Communications on this development story. We have all this coming up. Do stay. Hello and welcome back. Now, the prices of some petroleum products are expected to go down this weekend, and this is based on data that Joy Business has secured from bulk importers of petroleum products. But will consumers really benefit from this reduction as previous declines were not applied? Of course, we have a petroleum expert joining us via Zoom, Mr. John Atefua, to help us understand the remit of this particular discussion. We're so grateful that you joined us, Mr. Atefua. First of all, are OMCs expected to comply, having to reduce the prices following this particular statistic?
That's the expectation that whenever there's a movement, whether upwards or downwards, the market would allow it to pass through, and so that the consumers will benefit from it. As to how far it comes or to what extent they really stick with the reduction is another matter, because realize also that some may be carrying stocks from different pricing windows, and that may impact on when they would pass through this particular reduction.
So therefore, is it justified not to comply?
I don't know what compliance means here. You see, if you have a deregulated market, then you're expecting the market to determine these things. And if people don't comply, unless it's a place where there's a monopoly, people will go to the alternative and see if any oil marketing company has reduced their price. Then of course, consumers will go there and purchase from there. So if you decide to stick with your price and not go down, then eventually people will vote with their pockets. The worry is if it's industry-wide, which then may suggest a cartel situation.
But don't you think
that is the case?
Don't you think this is a reality on the ground now, as we speak?
That the industry is banding together to fix prices?
Somewhat of a case.
I didn't get you right.
I'm saying that somewhat of a case that many people are raising, that there is this formation of a cartel in the downstream petroleum sector.
Well, then it behoves the regulator to intervene and ensure that what we set out to do by deregulating is not, it's not sabotaged by this kind of behavior, because that would be most unfair, considering where we've come from, where we've had prices fixed 1 year, 2 years, stable, and then you get 100% increase, those things. It's all to minimize these things that we got to this stage. So if industry continues to act that way, then it will be most unfair. And when I was talking to your radio guys the other time, I spoke about the attempts during President Kufuor's time to have the Fair Trade Commission, which would have been the body to ensure that in the free market situation, we don't get catalyzations that would distort the market environment.
Great, but already you have explained to us the reasons why many of these, OMCs might not be able to, reduce the prices, and it comes on the wake of the deregulation policy. I want to ask you personally, you being a petroleum expert, you have seen it all, you've engaged with the players over time. What's your take on the deregulation policy? Is it really meeting up to the expectations?
I think it is, but you see, for a market to be, for the a deregulated market to really work effectively, if people need information, and places like Joy and the media can help people to know who is doing it right, and then I'm sure consumers will take the right decisions. But if they are not, they are in the dark, and it just goes to chances on a filling station. When its empty light is on, or warning light is on, then the person will go to whoever has it and purchase from them, oblivious of the fact that somebody next door may be selling it far, far cheaper than what he's buying. So information, and maybe the authority as well, may help consumers to know those who comply and those who are doing it right, so that they can also get some business and help us to deepen the deregulation.
Well, finally, before I let you go, Mr. Tifo, there is this concern within the downstream sector when it comes to adulterated petroleum, of which the MPA has raised stark concerns about. Just recently, we saw the MPA together with the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Baumia, launch a particular, software, call it an application, that is going to check this particular matter, which of course emanates into price fixing and the issues about hauling and everything. How do we clean up the system in the downstream petroleum sector?
Vigilance on the part of the regulator, and also by checking the
I'm afraid we're losing Mr. Tifo there. He's been speaking to us regarding matters in the downstream petroleum sector. Of course, we do know that there should be some expected reduction in the prices of fuel coming this weekend. And it begs the question about whether or not these OMCs could comply under the deregulation policy. But you rightly heard Mr. Tifo stating the fact that it is a policy which, of course, does not have a strong legal backing which could, emanate in criminal activity should these OMCs fail to comply. Unfortunately, we're having issues with the line. I think he's back online. If you could try and get him back, but I'm afraid we don't have him at this particular moment, but we shall continue the conversation as and when. In the meantime, the Minister for Communications, Esla Osu-Akufo, has called for some media regulations to deal with fake news and harmful content. Speaking at a consultative meeting with media stakeholders a while ago, the Minister argued that even as these laws will not stifle freedom of expression, it will go a long way to sanitize the media landscape.
If for nothing at all, the imperative of having a set of regulations to guide the content that we produce is now apparent to all of us. And I believe that as men and women of goodwill, we will work together to ensure that we serve our nation well in this area as well. And while we're at it, we need to look at the ease with which fake news is also spreading around us based on the social media platforms that we have. And now there's a convergence between traditional and new media, and the lines are blurred because you, the traditional media practitioners, are taking your content from social media and vice versa. So the rules which guide traditional media must also be crafted in such a way that it can also guide the new media as well. How do we do that? We need to think through, look at best practices from around the world, and see how we can sanitize this space so that what we read on new and social media we can accept as largely credible. If the proliferation of fake news undermines the integrity of the work that you do, you will be the losers, because it will only breed skepticism and cynicism about the content of the media, the information that is published out there. And ultimately, it will affect your output. So let's all work together to see how we can use the current tools at our disposal. And there's something in the Electronic Communications Act which makes it possible for us to pull down content that is false, misleading, or criminal, broadcast on electronic platforms. It's there. We've never used it. But it's time for us to look at, and I'm sure that the legal director of the NCA in his presentation will deal with some of these issues. If Twitter and Facebook can pull down offending content and have regulations about how you use those platforms, we can also decide as platform owners what kind of content we will host on the platforms, and it will be perfectly legal. However, you do not want to stifle this very vibrant space by heavy-handed, overbearing legislation. So let's work together to find common ground, which will enable us to facilitate the innovation and the talent and the creativity of our people, and enable us to also disseminate that freely while protecting our impressionable young minds from a barrage of offensive and unwholesome material.
That's the Minister for Communications and Digitization there. Let's now hear from the Attorney General, Godfrey Adame, who says that the remits of the law must abide when it comes to regulating the media space.
The very constitutional architecture of the nation even requires that there is in place a legal regulatory framework that not only gives vent to the expression of media rights and other freedoms of the media, but also puts in place reasonable limitations for the exercise of those rights. And I refer to Article 21. We all know that Article 21, Clause 1, grants to the media freedom of expression, to all citizens of Ghana freedom of expression, and also grants to us the freedom of information. But then in the same Article 21, we find in Clause 4, accord with public order, morality, and health of the nation. Then you go to the specific chapter on the media, Article 162 and 163, bolster the rights of the media. But again, in Article 164, there is the permission to impose restrictions in the interest of public order, public morality, and for the protection of the rights and freedoms of others. So you see that the Constitution itself recognizes that there ought to be reasonable limitations imposed by law, and those laws definitely ought to be on the basis of public order, public morality, and the protection of the rights and freedoms of reputations of others. But in this country, you see that there's an absence of a specific legislation which gives expression to the reasonable limitations that ought to be imposed in accordance with public order, public morality, and the protection of rights of others. I think that this sense, of course, is not only in the area of the media. Parliament has even failed to act, especially in areas relating to the Article 181 obligation. There's an obligation on the part of Parliament to enact laws that will regulate the Article 181 obligation of the state.
Well, government and parent companies of Airtel Tigo, Bharti Airtel Ghana Holdings, MIC Africa BV have concluded negotiations and signed an agreement to transfer the shares of the company to the Ghana government. Now, this follows the announcement of the company's departure from the Ghanaian market last year. The minister signed on behalf of government, while Janita Katarina and Martin P. Fletcher, Timothy Pennington, Eric Nananipa, and Vish Ashiago signed on behalf of the seller entities. Now, in October 2020, Airtel and Melecom announced that they were exiting actually, the Ghanaian market, and this agreement concludes the extensive negotiations between the parties to ensure a seamless transition and continued operation of Airtel Tigo thereafter. According to Esla Osu, the communications minister, the agreement transfers all customers' assets and agreed liabilities of Airtel Tigo to government. So it is official now. Government has officially taken over Airtel Tigo in that regard. Away from that, private sector employees are less likely to demand loan than their public sector counterparts. A research led by Samuel Teria Bedu, a PhD candidate at the Department of Economics at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, has revealed. It says that being a private sector employee decreases the likelihood of demanding loans. Love FM's Kwesi Deborah has more in this report.
The research was sought to investigate how people's socio-economic status affects their demand for loan. Recruited 700 people from the Kwawu West municipality of the eastern region of Ghana.
Up to now, even in spite of the financial sector adjustment program or the liberalization of the financial sector, individuals still do not have access to credit. And this raises concerns in the sense that these individuals who do not have access to credit might not be able to fulfill their consumption and investment plans. And also it raises some concerns in the sense that they will be financially excluded. And this one will also make it difficult for the achievement of
which was published in the journal Science and Technology, also found that financially literate people or people who have obtained tertiary education are more likely to demand loan.
And then one could attribute this one to the fact that individuals with tertiary education are likely to have some sort of skills and some investment ambitions, and for that matter, it influences their decision to go in for loan, to undertake some of these investment ambitions. Individuals who are financially illiterate will be able to understand the terms and conditions regarding these loan facilities, and for that matter, facilitate their access to the loans that they demand.
Income level was also talked about in this research. As your income rises, so is your demand for loans.
Any substantial income in our research from above 200 Ghana cedis are more likely to demand loan. And of course, one reason you could subscribe to this particular finding is that who will be able to repay the loan in the event that they approve and disburse the loan subsequently to them. I mean, they will not have issues with loan default.
And let me ask you this question. Do you think household size and for loans?
In our study, gender and household size play much
or divorce, or you are active in the labor force. If you are in these categories, then it means the demand for loan is higher.
And the reason could be that these individuals are active in investment ambitions, and they may want to undertake investment projects.
There is a need for broad policy package on financial inclusion. Everybody is protected.
Policies deepening financial inclusion in the country must be incorporated in the broad policy package that are aimed at enhancing the welfare of Ghanaians. Specifically, these individuals that we have highlighted are those who are less likely to demand loans. These individuals are more likely to be excluded. They need to incorporate them or capture them in the financial industry, and that's the financial inclusion we are talking about here. Ensure that these ones have access to affordable financial services and products.
And that's Kwesi Deborah's report there. You're still watching The Marketplace. We're taking a short break. We'll be right back this day. You're welcome back to the program. The former finance minister said TechWeb has called for a strategic mode of dealing with workers' demand amid the pandemic. He spoke on PM Express Business Edition with George Rafi.
We should be steadfast with the mechanisms that we started to put in place to manage crisis, using the oil revenue. That is stabilization fund in particular, sinking fund to manage debt, borrowing for commercial projects so that they are not a burden through the self-financing mechanism. Having put this in a broader context, the current problem we are facing is that apart from the squeeze, which is making it difficult for wages to be paid by the government,
well, government could meet some of its macroeconomic targets for this year if it works assiduously towards it. That's the view of economists with the University of Ghana, Dr. Priscilla Chumisi-Bafo. According to her, government has projected a gross domestic product of 5% and of the inflation of 8% and a fiscal deficit of 9% of gross domestic products for this year. And for that matter, she says that the targets are achievable if government is strategic.
I am very optimistic about it in terms of the macroeconomic targets that have been laid out there. I think that once we work assiduously towards it, definitely we will be able to hit the targets, if not the 5%, for example, GDP growth rate. We can do something that is quite close on the macro indicators, other macro indicators, and on the monetary front, we're looking at exchange rates, the prime rate, or inflation. I think overall we are on a good path to recovery.
Well, just before we leave, the total value of accounts held on mobile money accounts, wallets, continue to hit record levels. It ended last year reaching almost 6.6 billion cedis. This represents about 90% of the total mobile money account held by all. There is more in this report.
The total mobile money revenue, 2% comes from remittance. So we already remittance market. We are seeking to expand that and to have a lot more partners adopt our platform to reach out to customers in Ghana. We also have been having a lot of engagement with the regulator to explore opportunities around outward remittance, because today the remittance portfolio is only inward remittance. And so that's also another area that can support remittance. So regional remittance is going to be a focus to see how we can move money within the ECOWAS region using all the leverages that are available.
How we end the marketplace. For more news, do log on to myjoyonline.com. Have a good afternoon.